If you are just now getting into Marvel Snap, one, what took you so long? And two, that's pretty cool. I'm happy you're playing a cool game like Marvel Snap. But when you're first starting out, there's some things you should know because you're not going to be able to play all the cards that you want to play right away. When you first start playing Marvel Snap, you are at collection level 0, which means that you are in pool 1 and you only have access to pool 1 cards. Now, not all pool 1 cards are created equal. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to be doing a tier list for all of the Pool 1 cards in Marvel Snap. Now, this will be my personal opinion on these Pool 1 cards, so do not take this to heart and take it with a grain of salt if you want to, but I've been playing this game for several months now and I feel pretty confident about a lot of the cards and their placements in this tier list. So let's check it out. All right, here we go. We have the Pool 1 tier maker tier list for Marvel Snap, and the cards are all going to be in alphabetical order. We have Abomination and Yondu from A to Z, I guess A to Y, there's no Z card here in Pool 1. So we're gonna start with our boy Abomination. I don't think this card is useless, but I don't think he's very good. You could maybe run him in a Patriot deck because he doesn't have an ability, but I don't think it's really worth it as a 5-drop card. I think there's better combinations there with cards like Sarah or really anything else, because I just don't feel like his power is worth it for the combination that you're getting. For one card, it's like just not very good. I think there's just way better ways around playing a Patriot deck than using Abomination, and he doesn't really fit in anywhere else, so I think this card is kind of a miss. Next up, we have America Chavez. America is good. You are always guaranteed to get her on turn 6, so she is a very reliable card with big power that you can get for very easy access. All you have to do is wait till turn 6 and you will have America Chavez. Sometimes this can help you, sometimes this can hurt you. So depending, like, oh, if it's turn 5 and there's one card that you really need that you haven't gotten yet, you know America's on turn 6, so you know you'll be playing without that card. You have to make decisions whether or not you want to still play the game after that happens or not. But I think in most cases, she's put in decks where the intention is to make all the moves that you want to make by turn 5 so you can play Chavez on 6. So I think when she has a deck that works well with her, I think America Chavez is a very solid card. Next up here we have Angel. Angel is a weird one because his effect is he will fly out of a deck to replace a card when a card has been destroyed. So he's kind of like a weird version of M'Baku that has a different proc. So it's kind of whatever. I guess he's a little better than M'Baku because he's easier to trigger, but if you just draw Angel, it's kind of the same thing. So I don't really know. Angel, I guess C tier. I might actually, this might be our first F tier after a card because I don't know anybody that actually runs Angel. This card is pretty whack. All right, up next we have our girl Angela. Angela, in my opinion, used to be S tier, and now that she is 0 power to start, I kind of put her down a little bit, maybe B tier. I think the card is still good. I think she still has a place, but she's definitely not as strong as she once was. I think this card, being a 0 cost, not getting anything out on the board on the turn 2 play is a little rough because you're probably going to lose priority. So I don't think this card is as strong as she once was. So I think Angela is probably somewhere in the B tier. All right, Apocalypse. Apocalypse is very popular right now. We got all the discard madness going on with cards like MODOK and stuff like that, Morbius. Dracula Apocalypse is the way right now because he's always going to be in your hand as long as you don't play him. And if you discard him, he just stays in your hand. So he's perfect for Dracula decks. I'm going to put him somewhere in the A tier because I feel like this card is pretty bonkers. I think Apocalypse is kind of nuts. So A tier for Apocalypse. All right, Armor is an S tier card in my opinion. This is a great answer for a lot of things that are very important in the meta. You can stop a destroy deck with this. You can stop an Arnim Zola play with this. You can stop a Gambit. You can protect your cards from Destroyer if you're playing a destroy deck. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. Armor is super powerful because of the fact that it just has so many answers and so much utility there. I think this card is just a staple in a lot of decks, especially a lot of control decks. You'll see a lot of Armor because it's just it's invaluable. You completely make a location invincible, and the only real answer to it is something that removes the ongoing effect, like an Enchantress or a Rogue. So I really do think Armor is one of the best cards in the game right now. All right, next up we have Bishop. Bishop's good. I have no complaints about Bishop. I think he's a pretty balanced card, starting out as a 3/1. I know a lot of these costs on these cards are going to be a little awkward, but they're, inaccurate because they're old. So currently Bishop being a 3/1, and with every card played after Bishop, it has to be played, not cards that just show up on the board like Brood clones or something like that, or Ultron drones. That would be busted. This card is very good. I think Bishop is in a good place, and I think that he works well when after turn 3 you have a card or several cards to play after 4, 5, and 6. So I think the card does what it's supposed to do, and I think it's got a place in several different kinds of decks. You see Bishop in quite a few different types of decks right now, but he's not really OP or anything. He kind of just does his thing, and you can get a pretty big Bishop if you have a lot of cards to play. Next up is Blade. Blade, very commonly used in discard decks. When you're in pool 1 by yourself, Blade doesn't have too much purpose because discard doesn't really come in till like end of pool 3, pool 4 in my opinion, but he's a 1/3, and if there's a chance that you could maybe discard like, I don't know, a Wolverine or something. Wolverine's in pool 2, right? Or pool 1, right? Yeah, he is. So there's a little bit of utility there. It does discard a random card, so you don't always get what you want, but being a 1/3 is pretty good because that's pretty good power. So I think Blade's somewhere in the B tier. Next up, we have Cable. Cable has pretty high utility, especially later on when you can take cards and add them to your hand to buff Collector and stuff like that. Stuff that does very good synergy with stuff like Agent 13. I think Cable's pretty good. I'd have to put Cable in the B tier as well, probably somewhere right here. I think Cable has its place, especially in those decks where you want to ramp up your hand a lot. Stuff like White Queen as well, make a big Devil Dinosaur. So I think the card has its place for sure. It's definitely not a bad card. Captain America also going to go in the B tier for me, probably the top of B. Ongoing effect that everything at the location is going to get buffed, and I think that's pretty good. It's a 3/3, so it's got a pretty good base stat. It's working really well right now in ongoing decks, like with Spectrum Destroyer. That's the one I see the most that has Captain America, where you're just buffing your other cards and then everything else gets buffed by Spectrum while being protected by armor, and the armor gets buffed too. So that's usually the combination you see is like, it'll be like Captain America, armor, what's another example of a card that would go in that location? Ant-Man, and then maybe Warpath in one location. And then you'd have the Destroyer or the Professor X on another, just locking something down. So I think this card is very good. I might even put the argument that it might be A tier, but I think B is probably solid where it belongs. Next up, we have Carnage. Carnage is the staple destroy deck card. Carnage is even used in decks that aren't necessarily destroy decks, just to proc certain things like Nova or Bucky, just to get the combination out there. So I think Carnage is an A tier card. It is the lowest cost destroy card that I can think of. I don't think there's another destroy card that is as low cost as Carnage. So I think Carnage is a pretty good staple. I believe A tier is where this card belongs. You can get a pretty big Carnage too, +2 for every card that you destroy. If you do Carnage on something like, what's the location? Is it Bar Sinister? Carnage gets pretty crazy. So you can really, you can get a pretty big Carnage that way. There's a lot of different cool tricks with this card that I think people use a lot to make this card really maximize its potential. So I think Carnage is very good. All right, up next we have Cosmo. For me, Cosmo is a very easy S tier. This card is amazing. You see this in so many meta decks. This card like absolutely controls a location because on reveal effects are huge in this game. And then you have ways to manipulate them, like stuff like Wong or Odin. And if there's a Cosmo played where those cards are played, they are now useless. They are now only there for their power, and their abilities no longer matter. This card is godlike, and you would be a fool not to use this if you're trying to win. I think Cosmo is OP. All right, next up we have Cyclops. Cyclops is okay. He's nothing fantastic. He works very well in a Patriot deck. I think three cost for 4 power is good. And then with a Patriot, say you have a Patriot and a Mystique out, he's going to be an 8 power. You know, you can get him up to 9 if you also have a Blue Marvel. So I think this card has more value than Abomination. I'll put him at like the bottom of B because, again, it's a card with no ability. But I think for the cost and the power that you get, I think the card is good for what it's worth. I think a 5/8 is kind of whack, but a 3/4 is kind of more my speed. I think Cyclops is a good alternative if you don't have a turn 3 Brood or a Debris. I think this works well. Up next, we have Deathlock. Deathlock, kind of like Carnage here, is a 3 cost, 5 power card, so it's even bigger than Cyclops, and it's very good because it destroys everything at a location when it's revealed. Now, I do think that this card is kind of risky to play any later than turn 3 because you usually have other cards there that you don't want to destroy by then. So this card is really good when it's played on turn 3, and if it's not played on turn 3, it's kind of whack. Or if you don't have an open location, it's kind of whack. So I think Deathlock's probably somewhere here in the B tier as well, where you can get an easy 5-power card out and then maybe proc stuff like a Deadpool, a Nova, anything that needs to be destroyed to help you get death out a little bit faster, whatever the case might be. I think Deathlock is a very good card when played right, but I do think there's a little bit of a drawback to it, so I'm going to put it in the B tier. Up next, we have the Devil Dinosaur. I think by Pool 1 standards, this is probably an S tier card, but in the game, in the long game, Devil Dinosaur probably falls somewhere here in the A tier. I think Devil Dinosaur and Moon Girl is a combination we're probably going to see forever, as long as those cards never really get changed in any capacity. Devil Dinosaur is probably always going to be pretty important because he's basically a reverse Darkhawk, right? Where for every card in your hand that you have, he gets +2. So the card is always going to be a threat, especially in decks like stuff like, Agent 13 and Cable. And when you can get a really big Devil Dinosaur consistently, then you're always going to have a big massive card that you can play, and you mix that with the Moon Girl, you have so many options. So 2 Devil Dinosaurs is huge, and that can definitely win you a game. So I think Devil Dinosaur is probably an A tier card. Gotta watch out for the Shang-Chi's though. All right, up next we have Doctor Strange. I'm gonna be completely biased here, and I'm just gonna say that the move cards are kind of whack. I think if you play a movement deck, you're kind of hindering yourself in a way. I don't think that the move decks are very good. I think that they're lacking right now, and I don't know exactly what they need to make them better either. So it's a little it's a little weird. So we're gonna take a look at Doctor Strange. I think I'm gonna put him in the C tier. I just really don't like the move decks, so I don't really, you can move I guess there's a little bit more utility to Doctor Strange because he can move any card that just has the most power at a location, so you can use him for utility, I guess, but I don't see why you would use that when you could just play your cards better. You know what I mean? You don't really have to use Doctor Strange to help you out. If you're going to play your cards in the right spot, play them in the right spot. I don't know. I don't think this card is all that. I would love to see a crazy Doctor Strange play that didn't involve him being in a move deck. All right, next up we have Domino. F tier. Any questions? This card is bad. This card is not good. She doesn't really do anything. You pull her on turn 2 and that's it. She's a 2/3. And that's it. She's like a proc for Lockjaw, right? What else is there about Domino? I think that's pretty much it. She's pretty much the most whatever card in the game. Gonna have to start spanning the size of the tier list here. Up next we have Elektra. Elektra is funny because I feel like every time I see an Elektra when I'm playing, they always play her on turn 1 just to guess where the turn 1 card is gonna be, and then they try to destroy it. Whereas they could just wait till turn 2 and then play her where the turn 1 card was. I don't know. It's very funny to me. I think this card's not bad. Elektra has some utility because you can get rid of a Sunspot with this card. You can get rid of, I don't know why you would use her over Killmonger is the question though. But if you're in Pool 1, she's all right. So I'll put her in the C tier. I like her better than Abomination, that's for sure. She has a little bit of utility, but she's also a 1/1. So do you use her in a Khazar deck that also is trying to counter another Khazar deck? I guess. I don't know. Elektra's a weird card. All right, up next we have what I believe to be possibly the best card in Pool 1 is Enchantress. Enchantress is an on-reveal card that stops all ongoing effects at a location when it is revealed. So it's kind of like the opposite of Cosmo, but it's not an ongoing card itself. It's an on-reveal. So it happens once and then that's it. So if you see a Patriot and a Mystique on the same location, kind of just buffing the entire board, you just boop, drop an Enchantress down on it, and now that person is probably going to retreat. So this card, insane value, insane plays. You can shut down some of the strongest cards in the game with Enchantress. You shut down Morbius, you shut down Devil Dinosaur. There are so many ongoing cards that have great abilities that Enchantress just says nope to. So I think the value there is insane. All right, next up we have Forge. Forge is a little bit of a buffer card. It's a 2 cost, 1 power card that gives +2 to the next card that you play. So say you play Forge on turn 2, and then you play, I don't know, Bishop on turn 3. Instead of Bishop being a 3/1, he starts out as a 3/3, and then continues to get buffed as you play Bishop. So Forge is okay. I think Forge is somewhere in the B tier as well. Probably about right here near Cable, I'd say. Nothing special with this card. He gets the job done, and he's reliable. So not a bad card, not a top tier, just somewhere in the middle. Next up, we have Groot, and Groot is an interesting card that gets +4 when it's revealed. It doesn't really ever happen though, because all the Guardians of the Galaxy cards are like hard reads, like Mantis, Rocket Raccoon, Star-Lord, Drax. They all have to happen on the same turn, on the same location. And if that doesn't work out, you're kind of just left with a whatever card. Groot, I believe now is a 3/5. I misspoke. Groot is now a 3/4. So if you don't get the proc off of the reveal, then he's still just a 3/4. So he's kind of like Cyclops with a little bit more utility, but I really think that's about it. I'm going to put him in the same tier. I'm going to put him about B tier. I think Groot is okay at best. I'm actually going to backtrack and maybe move these cards to C, because I don't think Elektra deserves to be in C when Groot and Cyclops are in B. So I think these cards also have to come to B, but they're definitely better than Doctor Strange. All right, up next we have Hawkeye. Hawkeye is a 1/1 that has an on reveal of if you play a card after this card is revealed, if you play it on the same location, then Hawkeye gets +3. Again, I misspoke. It gets +2. So you can still buff the Hawkeye, essentially making it a 1/3. Now, it's a little bit of a predictable card because your opponent knows that you're going to want to play on the Hawkeye to buff it. So a little tough there, but I do think it's still got some good utility. I'm going to put this somewhere in the B tier as well. Hawkeye is a solid card. Nothing too fancy. I'm surprised you don't see it more frequently, because I think a 1/3 when you're trying to get out a lot of cards, like especially in a Kazoo deck, I think the Hawkeye pick is pretty good. For 1 cost, this card gets the job done. All right, next up we have Heimdall. Heimdall is a 6 cost, 8 power card that moves every card on your side of the field 1 location to the left. So if they're on the furthest left location, they don't move. If they're in the middle, they go to the left. And if they're on the right, they go to the middle. So this card is a 6/8. So it can't get Shang-Chi'd unless it's getting buffed by something else, which usually move decks don't do. And it moves all your cards. So you're looking to use this to buff your movement cards that will power up by moving. So stuff like Human Torch, stuff like Multiple Man, which procs the ability, Vulture, anything that has an on-reveal, or not an on-reveal, but an effect where if you play the card and then it gets moved, it gets some sort of interaction buff. So it's looking to do that. Heimdall, kind of the staple of the deck, because it's supposed to just move all the cards at once and go nuts. Here's a bunch of numbers. Kraven gets huge, yada, yada, yada. I'm going to put him at the bottom of B, because this card is pretty much the reason that move decks even work in the first place. So I think he has to be in B. If I put him any lower than that, it would be just laughable. Like, why would you even play move decks when the best card in the deck is in C tier, you know? So I think Heimdall is just super whatever. Buff move decks, man. All right, up next we have Hulkbuster. Hulkbuster is a very good card, and I think this card helps the move deck, but it's not used only in move decks. You can use Hulkbuster in a variety of different decks that I think really help a lot. I like Hulkbuster in a destroy deck too. If you latch this onto you can latch this onto like a Deadpool and then make it even bigger so that when it gets destroyed, it gets super double the power. So I think Hulkbuster is probably somewhere in A. Hulkbuster is a very good card that I think sometimes gets overlooked. I'd like to see more Hulkbuster in the future. All right, up next we have just regular Hulk. Hulk by himself is a 6/12, and in Pool 1, that's a pretty big dude. But as you go on, Hulk is not as prevalent when you have stuff like Giganto and Magneto running around. It's pretty much the same thing, but without an ability. So Hulk, kind of whatever. Kind of in that same vein as Abomination, where like no ability for a 6-cost card is kind of whack. You want a really, really big play on turn 6, right? And just getting 12 power to 1 location, it's okay when you're actually playing in Pool 1, but in the context of the full game, I don't think that's very good. So Hulk going to be in the lower end of C tier for me. Up next, we have Iron Fist, another move card. What can you say? On reveal effect is that the next card you play is going to move 1 location to the left. So I guess, I mean, this is another move card. I think it's probably worse than Doctor Strange, because it's just like, all right, you get to move the card that you play to the left, and it's going to be Multiple Man. It's always going to be Multiple Man. Unless you don't have the Multiple Man, then turn 3, it's going to be Vulture. And then, oh, it's not Vulture. What's it going to be? A Human Torch? It's just, move decks are just so bad. I just don't think that they're very good. You play 1 Cosmo against a move deck, and they're done. There's nothing else they can do. It's whack. It's awful. Terrible, terrible cards. I really don't think that they're very good in the long run, honestly. They're just not worth the time. So Iron Fist, bottom of C with Doctor Strange. See ya. Okay, this card is probably the hardest one for me to put in the tier list because I truthfully don't know how I feel about this card sometimes. Iron Man. Iron Man is a 5 cost, 0 power card that just doubles the total power at a location. So that can either be amazing or it can be really bad. So Iron Man can take a location that has something like, in the context of the bad stuff, like if you have something that has like Hobgoblin on it, you know, that's a -8, it's gonna get -16. So you cannot play that at that location. It's gonna be bad. So you have to really be careful where you play this Iron Man on turn 5. Because if you play it on a location that has like one big card, it's like, oh, I'm going to play this on my Red Skull, have 30 power, and then all of a sudden somebody plays a Hobgoblin there. It's like, now you have 14 power. Is that enough to win the game? I don't know. So I really don't know how I feel about Iron Man. I'm going to put him at the top of B because I think he's good when he works, but he's really bad when he doesn't work. So he's going to be somewhere at the top of B for me. I could see the argument for him being higher. I could see the argument for him being lower, and I'm not going to be the one to argue. I'm going to put him right in the middle. I'm going to put him right in the middle where he's safe because I don't know what to make of this card. I honestly don't. I think he works really well in a Mr. Negative deck, and that's kind of like almost where he shines because as a 0/5 that doubles everything, he's basically a 10 power card at the cost of 0. That's like his best case scenario, but otherwise he's just so like one extreme to the next. He's all over the place. All right, up next we have Jessica Jones. She is a 4/4. Her ability is that once she is played, if you don't play a card there next turn on that same location where Jessica is, she will get another +4 power. So essentially in most cases when people play Jessica Jones, she is treated as a 4/8. Now that's very good, especially if you use her on turn 4 after you played a turn 3 Storm. You know, you drop the Storm down 3/2, and then you put a Jessica Jones there, you're guaranteed 10 power on that location where it's flooded. So I do think that Jessica Jones has pretty good utility. I'm going to put her at like the bottom of A because I feel like you see her a lot in Pool 1, and then it kind of falls off a little bit where people start experimenting a lot more, and then you get back into like the better decks and you see more Jessica Jones again. So I think she's a pretty good card because of that. I think she's solid. All right, up next we have Kazar. Kazar I think definitely has to be A tier. He's the king of the Kazoo deck. You know, he makes all those 1-cost cards better, and then when paired with stuff like Onslaught, he can just really make things very powerful. He could also work with Spectrum. There's a lot of cards that work with Kazar because he buffs all 1-cost cards. So I think Kazar is very good. I'm gonna move him higher up on the Pool 1 A tier here because I think he's just, you know, he's the king of Pool 1, really. Honestly, there's so many 1-drops in this pool that it's like, you know, early on, are you really playing anything other than a Kazar deck? You know, like what's there besides Kazar decks and Devil Dinosaur Moon Girl, you know? It's really tough to play anything else. All right, up next we have Claw. Claw, I think, is low-key kind of underrated. I think this card has some good utility. Claw is a 5-cost, 4-power card, which doesn't sound great, but the good thing about being Claw is that if you play it in the left or in the middle, it's very good because the location to the right gets +6 power. So it's kind of like an awkward Mr. Fantastic, and you're getting 10 power out, but it's split between where you play Claw for 4 power and the location to the right gets 6. You would never play Claw on the right location because then he's useless, right? So you would never do that. But I do think if you have a location that you can't play on, say a Sanctum Sanctorum, or if it's flooded and you're not winning that location, you just drop the Claw on the location to the left, and you now can very easily win that location. 6 power on a location that can't be played on, that can be pretty hard to beat sometimes. So I think that Claw is a very good card, and it's an ongoing effect. It's not an on reveal. So there are counters to it, so I don't think it's perfect, but I do think it's good. So I'm going to put Claw here in the bottom of A with Jessica Jones. Up next we have Korg, and Korg is a very good 1-drop that causes some disruption. It throws a rock into your opponent's deck. Now on turn 1 that's very annoying because that means for the next 5 turns there's a possibility that your next card draw could be nothing. It could be just a rock, and if you're not a Patriot deck, that's not gonna be good for you because you're just missing a card draw now. So Korg as a disruptive Force is very good. So I'm going to put him in the A tier because I think that's his job. He works well in Cerebro decks. He works well in Kazoo decks. You know, the card has a ton of utility. So I think Korg is going to be somewhere here in the A tier as well. I think he gets the job done and he causes some good disruption. Later on, I would argue that the card gets even better when you start messing around with the card Darkhawk, because you get the insane buff from having more cards in your opponent's deck, and then once you play Darkhawk, you get a massive card. So Korg helps out with that as well. So I think that that's a very powerful thing to look forward to in the future, from pool 1 all the way to pool 5. All right, up next we have Kraven. Kraven, probably one of the better pool 1 move cards, honestly, because of the fact that it isn't something that really moves around. It has to deal with the area around it. So you can use Kraven in a situation where other cards are moving. So like, let's say you have Kraven out and you have like a Magneto on turn 6. You can pull all the 3 and 4 cost cards to where the Magneto is to be on top of the Kraven, and that'll buff the Kraven. You know, you get +2 on the Kraven for every card that moves there. So if you have a bunch of 3-4 cost cards on one location that you can pull with Magneto, pull them towards the Kraven, and the Kraven will get huge. You can get +8 on a Kraven if you get the perfect situation. You can make him a 2/10. So the card does have really good utility outside of move decks, I feel, and I think that this card could be seen more if people wanted to play it more, but you really only ever see him in move decks. So I think in theory this card could be nasty, but he just doesn't have the current player base to make him break out his full potential, I feel like. So Kraven, I think, is good, but I think there's room for him to be better, honestly. All right, up next we have Lady Sif, aka Discard Apocalypse. Like, that's pretty much it. You just discard Apocalypse with this card. If you're not playing Apocalypse by itself, then maybe you're playing a Hela deck and you want to discard stuff like Magneto or Giganto or Infinite. That works well as well. Lady Sif is very good at just getting rid of the biggest card in your hand. Unfortunately, if you're playing Hela, sometimes you discard Hela and then that sucks. You usually have to suffer for that. So there's a little bit of a drawback there, but that's more of a Hela thing than it is a Lady Sif thing, in my opinion. So Lady Sif, definitely a very powerful card, one of the best cards in the discard deck meta, in my opinion. I think she's very good. And she's a 3/4 too, so she puts out a lot of power for what she does. Up next, we have the Lizard. Lizard is a 2/5 with the ongoing effect that if there's 4 other enemy cards at a location, this loses 3 power. So if you're playing Lizard in a deck that has like 0, where it can have its ability removed, then there's no negative drawbacks and you get a free 2/5. So that's pretty good. So I think Lizard is okay. I think Lizard's pretty good. I'm going to put him here in the B tier. All right, now that that's all set, we got Mantis. Mantis isn't very good. I'm going to put her in the C tier. She is a 1-cost, 2-power card with her on-reveal effect that if you play her somewhere where somebody else plays a card, then you will get a card from their deck. Now, in theory, this would be good if you knew where they were playing it. Like if you had like a Daredevil at all times and you knew exactly where they wanted to play their card, like I guess that could work, but that's not really worth it when you have to play her on turn 1 if you want to get the 2-power out. It's just not good. It's just not a very good card. You don't really ever get the benefit of it unless you're just guessing. You have to do a lot of guesswork with this card. On turn 1, you could play on all 3 locations, so you have a 33% chance of getting the turn 1 Mantis. And then what if they don't play anything? Now you just have a 1/2 on the board. It's like, all right, I guess if you're playing a Kazoo deck, I guess that's okay, but that's about it. I think Mantis is pretty whack. I think there's better 1-drops in pool 1 that you could be using. Up next, we have Medusa. Medusa's pretty mid. I don't think Medusa's great. When she's played in the middle, she gets +2 power, so she basically becomes a 2/4, but only when she's played in the middle. So she's like okay at best, I think. Her on reveal is pretty underwhelming, and she doesn't really get buffed besides that. So I think that this card is just somewhere in the middle. Like, you see her early on when everybody's in pool 1, and then like you see her less and less to the point where like you only ever remember that she exists if she gets put in your hand for some reason, like Triskelion or Weird World or something. I don't know, something weird. So Medusa, just kind of whatever. Maybe there needs to be a Medusa buff. Maybe make her a 2/3 and then she becomes a 2/5. That could be pretty cool. I could see that working, but as of right now, I don't think the card is all that great. Up next, we have Mr. Fantastic, and that's exactly what he is. He is fantastic. I think Mr. Fantastic's somewhere here up in the A tier. I'm going to move some of this stuff around too. I'm going to revise the A tier, but he's an ongoing card that is a 3/2 that buffs the adjacent locations with +2 power. So if you play Mr. Fantastic in the middle location, you are getting 6 power across your board, spread evenly. So this card is very good. It's an ongoing effect. If he gets moved anywhere, it's kind of not as good because then he's only going to be buffing one location as opposed to 2 when he's in the middle. But if he goes to the right, then he'll buff the middle location. If he goes to the left, he'll buff the middle location. So he's got, a little bit of a weakness, but other than that, I think the card is very good. You get very consistent results with this card. You can get power on locations that you can't play on if you use this card, no matter where Sanctum Sanctorum is or Death's Domain, Rickety Bridge, anything like that. You can get power on it with Mr. Fantastic without a card actually having to physically be there. So I think that's pretty invaluable. I think the card is fantastic, literally. Up next, we have Mr. Sinister. Mr. Sinister is pretty cool. I think this card has a good amount of synergy with a bunch of different cards. He has a 2/2 that when on revealed, he creates a clone of himself that's also another 2/2. He works well in Patriot decks. He works well in decks where you need to have 2 power on the board, so he works well with Cerebro too. I'm going to put Mr. Sinister at the top of B, I think. I think he's pretty good. I think that there's a little bit of a weakness with the fact that he takes up 2 slots, but I think that kind of like Iron Man, sometimes it could pay off for you, sometimes it won't. So I think Mr. Sinister is all right. Maybe not the exact top of B. Maybe I'll put him like over here. I think that looks a little bit better. And I'll probably have to adjust the squish tier list thing again in a little bit. All right, up next we have the Misty Knight. Misty Knight, probably somewhere in the C tier here with all these other cards that don't have abilities. They only really ever work when they're paired with Patriot. That's kind of it. Or if you get Washington, D.C. as the location, that's really it. I'm going to move Groot a little further down because I think he's kind of whatever. I'll put him like above Abomination, maybe above Hulk too. But if you play these cards early on with no abilities, at least you can still set up shop, right? Like Misty Knight on a turn 1, it's like, okay, we know what you're doing. That could have been a Mantis, right? But like, what you're going to be using her for instead, where Mantis is just like a one and done. Misty Knight can get pretty big. If you're playing Patriot with Mystique, she becomes a 6-drop. And then if you have something else to buff it, like, I don't know, a Blue Marvel or something, she can become up to 7. So there's, she can get pretty big. She can get pretty up there. So definitely not a useless card, but definitely not great either. If Misty Knight was a little bit bigger, she'd be a problem in my opinion. Make her like a 1/3. Ooh, God. It could get nasty. It could get pretty nasty. So I think Misty Knight's probably the most card out of all the Patriot deck cards. Up next, we have Moon Girl. I think Moon Girl's an easy S tier. She is the queen of Pool 1 as far as like making Devil Dinosaur happen and getting other cards twice. You know what I mean? If you Moon Girl on turn 4, then you get 2 Iron Mans, and say you have like 2 big locations, like 2 like 10 power locations or whatever. You Iron Man one, you Iron Man the other. It's pretty good stuff. I think Moon Girl is probably one of the best cards in the game to this day because you use her for everything. You use her with Death. You use her with Red Skull. You can use her with anything. She just doubles your hand, and that's just amazing. There's so much value there. There's so much you could do with that. The utility of this card is insane. I think I'll put her above Armor. Honestly, I think that's probably where she belongs. Moon Girl's a nasty card. So I think she's S tier, and I think she stays in S tier as long as she does what she does. If she changes in any capacity, she won't be S tier anymore. I think that card is like broken tier for sure. Next up, we have Morph. Morph is basically hard read. The card is a 3-cost, 0-power card that becomes a card in your opponent's hand. So you never know what Morph is going to turn into, right? So Morph is always going to be a risk. Now, there's always the chance that Morph could turn into something cool, like, I don't know, an Infinite or something. Or there's a chance it could turn into a Hobgoblin. And the Hobgoblin won't, it'll stay there. So I don't think that's very good. All right, next up we have Morph. Morph is like hard read the card. I'm gonna put Morph here in the F tier, honestly, because I just think he's too risky. Because yeah, he could turn into something cool. He turns into whatever's in your opponent's hand. So he could turn into like, I don't know, an Infinite or something, or he could turn into like, I don't know, worst case scenarios like Electra on a location that doesn't have a 1-drop, you know, like something bad. You know, it could be just anything, you know, that's just not good. So it's like the riskiest card in the game. I wouldn't play it. Morph is just scary in my opinion. I think that there's too much risk involved personally, so no more for me, please. All right, up next is Multiple Man. Gonna be joining Iron Fist right here down at the bottom. It's the exact same thing. Multiple Man is like the most mid on reveal move card ever. It's not even an on reveal, it activates when it gets moved. So wherever you play Multiple Man, you will always have a Multiple Man there. And then wherever it gets moved, that's, you know, you're gonna have another Multiple Man there too. So it's just like, I don't know, he's kind of like a thorn in his own side. I think Multiple Man is super whatever. He's a 2/3, so I guess that's cool, but whatever. Next up we have Namor. Namor's pretty good. He's a 4/5, and then he gets +4 when he's at a location by himself, so he becomes a 4/9. This works really well if Atlantis is the location that's available right then and there, so I think Namor is all right. I'll put him somewhere in the B tier. I think this card gets the job done. If he's not by himself, it's like, you got to find other ways to buff this card for him to get really, really schnasty. So I'll put him somewhere in the middle of B. I think Namor has its place. Up next, we have Nightcrawler. Nightcrawler is a 1/2 that after you play it, it can move to any location that it wants once. So you can play it on turn 1 somewhere safe, like an Elysium or, you know, anywhere that you can play a card without any drawbacks. And then by turn 2 or 3, if you see a location that you can't play on, like a Death's Domain or a Sanctum Sanctorum, you can put the Nightcrawler there. So I think this card has pretty good utility. I'm going to put him in A tier, and it's going to squish our tier list again here. I apologize for that, but I'm going to put Nightcrawler probably somewhere here by Korg. I think that makes sense for this card. The utility there is good, and he gets the job done. So I think him as a 1-drop is very strong. He works well in a Cerebro deck. I think he works well in a Kazoo deck, and I think the card is just good. You know, he doesn't need any changes. I think the card does what he does effectively, so he's an A tier card for me. Alrighty, so up next we have Nova. Nova used to be a 1/2, now he's a 1/1 that when destroyed gives every card on your side of the board +1 power. So he works well with, you know, stuff like Killmonger. He works well in a destroy deck. He's also an A tier card. I'm going to put with Nightcrawler, pretty much the same thing. Card is very good at doing what he does. There's really no drawback to playing a Nova. You know, he's a 1/1, so he doesn't do much, but as far as like, you know, helping out other cards, like say there's a flooding or another location that has a card that can't be contested because you can't play there anymore, you can use the Nova to maybe buff those cards and get some additional power there. So the Nova is a very good card. I think this card is pretty good. I don't know if they needed to nerf him to a 1/1 personally. I don't think Nova as a 1/2 is that big of a deal personally, because the 2 goes away when you destroy him. So I don't see why that mattered, but he would probably just be a little bit higher if he was a 1/2. So I'm going to keep him right there where he is in the A tier. Nova is a good card. Next up, we have Odin. Odin is going to be another A tier card for me because his on reveal ability is proc every other on reveal ability at this location. So Odin is very good because he can really change the game when you have cards there that have crazy on reveal abilities. So if you have something like Wong down and then you play something like Ironheart, okay, Ironheart's going to proc twice. Now let's say you play Odin on Wong. He's going to proc everything, and it's going to happen twice because of Wong. And then he's going to proc again because of Wong, and then everything else is going to proc twice because of Wong. So you can make some nasty combos with Odin and just make some really crazy plays because of the fact that he just doubles your on-reveal abilities. So this card is very, very good. He works really well with stuff like White Tiger, Black Panther, you know, anything that's gonna discard cards in a discard deck, you can put Odin in. That works too. So there's really a lot of utility here, and he's a 6/8, so he's a big card, and he gets a lot of power out really fast. So he does the job well, and he really can make or break a game on turn 6. Next up in line is Onslaught. Onslaught is an ongoing card that will double the effects of all other ongoing cards at the location that it's played at. So if you play Onslaught on top of a Patriot and a Mystique, instead of them giving +4 to all non-ability cards, they're now going to be +8 to all non-ability cards. So that's really good. This card is basically kind of like the Odin equivalent for ongoing cards, essentially. I'm going to put him also in the A tier here somewhere. I think Onslaught is very powerful. I think Onslaught and Odin kind of mirror each other very well. He's a 6'7" instead of a 6'8", I believe. So he's not as powerful, but just doubling ongoing abilities is super nasty. So if you can make that happen without any repercussions, that's really, really good. You know, you'd want to play him where you can really get huge power off of doubling an ongoing ability. So you wouldn't play him on something like Armor, because that's not going to matter. Or you're not going to play him on something like Lizard, because you might just make the Lizard even worse. You know, he could be like -6. You'd want to play him on stuff that has good ongoing abilities. He works well with stuff like Warpath or Captain America, anything that's going to buff an ongoing ability that's going to increase the value out of those cards. Onslaught is very good for those ongoing long-term decks. All right, up next we have Professor X. I forgot this was a pool 1 card. Is this really a pool 1 card? I must have forgot that somewhere deep in my mind. He has a 5 cost, 3 power card that really is kind of nasty because he can lock down a location for free. So not for free, for 5 energy, but once he's played at a location, that location cannot have any cards taken, removed, played, can't be destroyed, nothing. They can only be buffed or nerfed essentially in terms of their power. So whenever he's played there, if there's any other cards there, that's it. Those are the only cards that are gonna be there. So he's, you know, an absolute crazy card, especially if you have a Daredevil out and you know there's a location that you can lock down because your opponent played somewhere else. You played the Professor X, boom, that's it. You win that location for free. It cannot be contested. There can't be any cards added to it with like an Ultron or a Squirrel Girl or anything. So it's just done at that point. So Professor X, very, very good card. Some say he's broken. I would just like to point out that I am just now realizing that a lot of these cards aren't just considered pool 1 cards. Some of these are considered starter cards like Abomination and a couple other cards. And there's also other cards that are considered like level 1 to level 14, I think. So not every card here is technically pool 1, but these are still the cards that you would be using from pool 1, if that makes any sense. So that's why there's a lot more cards than what there appears to be in pool 1. Next up on the tier list, we have Punisher. Punisher is an ongoing card that is a 3 cost 2 power card that gets +1 power for every card of this location. I think he's just a little too weak for his ability. I'm gonna put him in somewhere in the C tier here, maybe with maybe like these Patriot cards, I guess, because I think that he just could be better. You know, if he was a little stronger, I think his ability would be pretty good. Maybe if he was like a 3/3 Punisher could be pretty good. But just for a 3/2, he gets +1 for every card there, becomes a 3/6. It's like, it's okay. I think it works well in like an ongoing type deck. Like if you have like a Spectrum to buff it, or you play an Onslaught there, that could be okay. But the card just falls off. As you play him more, you see less and less Punisher, and it's just like, it makes sense. The card is just kind of mid. Next up in line, we have Quicksilver. Quicksilver's pretty whack. He is a card that you always draw on turn 1. So like he works well in a Kazoo deck, and that's kind of it. He's a 1/2 that you just throw out there. I don't think he's really worthy of being anywhere other than F tier, honestly. I think that this card is just super whatever. He's a 1 cost, so he gets destroyed by Killmonger. He doesn't have any other effect other than, hey, I want to play a card on turn 1, which in the long game like context of Marvel Snap, like who cares? Up next is Rocket Raccoon, who gets +2 when a card is played at the location that he's played at on the turn that it's played. So he's kind of like a little bit better version of Mantis, a little bit. He's up there with like all the other Guardians of the Galaxy cards that are like all hard reads. Like you're gonna play a card here at this exact location on this exact turn, and that's like his only utility. So I don't know. The card is really hard to use in my opinion. The Guardians cards are definitely have a higher skill ceiling, that's for sure. So I think that puts him a little bit lower on the tier list because he's just not very applicable, especially early on in pool 1 where you're just trying to get a feel for the game. So Rocket Raccoon, whatever. I don't think the card is very good. He can become a 1/4, but you know, what are the odds? Up next is Scarlet Witch, who is a 2 cost 3 power card that can change a location to any other location. I think she's an A tier card. I think she's very good because she can pretty much create board disruption. You know, if you play her on a location that you don't like something that you can't really work with, then you could change it and then maybe get something better. Now there is always the possibility that could be something worse. Nothing hurts worse than playing Scarlet Witch on a location that you don't like, and then on turn 3 it becomes Murder World instead, and it's like, oh well, now you lose your Scarlet Witch also, and now it's Murder World, so anything else that's there is also dead. So yeah, Scarlet Witch is a pretty good card. There's a little bit of a drawback to it. I think there's a little bit more consistency with Rhino in pool. Is it pool 2 that he is, or pool 3? I don't know. Rhino is probably a more consistent Scarlet Witch, but this card is still very good, and you see this card pretty much all the time, even to this day. Scarlet Witch is good. She creates board disruption. That's always a great thing in this game, so I'm going to put her in the A tier. All right, up next is Sentinel. Sentinel is another very good card. He kind of works well in that same kind of deck we were talking about before with Agent 13 and Collector. Helps out buff the Devil Dinosaur because you will play him and you will always have another Sentinel in your hand. So if you want a big hand of cards, the Sentinel is very good for that. So there's good utility here. I'm going to put him down at the bottom of A, I think, here by Jessica Jones. Sentinel is very useful when you are playing a deck that revolves around having cards. And when you always have a 2/3, that's not a bad thing either, because two cost for 3 power is a pretty good deal. Up next is Shocker. Shocker is going to be in this same category with Cyclops and Misty Knight because it's basically just the 2-cost version of another card that doesn't have any ability. He has no ability. He gets buffed by Patriot, and that's pretty much it. So again, C tier for all the cards that are buffed by Patriot. That's kind of where they fall in my opinion, because they only work with Patriot. Next up we have Spectrum. Spectrum is an on-reveal card that buffs all ongoing cards by +2, I want to say. So she's also a 6-cost 5-power card, so she works really well in ongoing decks. I'm going to put Spectrum here in the A tier. She's very solid. She doesn't give out a lot of power herself, but she is very good at buffing these ongoing decks. So if you have stuff like Professor X or Armor, any of those ongoing cards that really just want to like lock down locations, she is very good at buffing the crap out of those cards. And even though she might not necessarily win a location by herself, she is very good at helping that goal be achieved by her ability. Where if you have like 5 or 6 ongoing cards on the field, you know, you get +2 to every single one of those cards, you can easily rack up another 10, 12 power just by playing Spectrum across your board. So I think she's very good. Up next is Spider-Woman, and I don't know what's up with these powers, but it says she's a 4/4. She is a 5/7 who inflicts every enemy card at her location with -1. I think this card is very overlooked these days. I think this card is actually pretty good. I like this card a lot. I'm going to put Spider-Woman down here in bottom of A, probably near Spectrum and Sentinel, I'd say. Maybe about there. I think this card has pretty good utility, and I think that for a 5/7, she's very good. I think this card is devastating in a lot of situations. I think Spider-Woman is kind of overlooked these days. I don't see enough Spider-Woman. I don't know why that is, when you can get -4 to an enemy location and there's really nothing they can do about it without Cosmo. So yeah, I think that's pretty nasty. And then you can like reactivate her. Like if you're really trying to nerf a location, you do turn 5 Spider-Woman, get +7 for yourself and -4 for them. That's basically an 11 power deficit for them. And then you play Odin on there, and then you get another 8 power from Odin, and then another -4. You can really, really win a location with this card if it's used in the right way. So I think Spider-Woman is very, very nasty. I'm actually gonna put her higher. Oh, I'm thinking I'm gonna put Spider-Woman up here. Spider-Woman's very good. She is super overlooked in my opinion. We got to see more Spider-Woman play. Up next, we have Squirrel Girl. Squirrel Girl has a lot of utility, man. I'm going to put her with these other 1-drops here in the A tier. I think Squirrel Girl is solid. When she is revealed, she is a 1-power, 1-cost card that creates another squirrel. Actually, it creates 2 squirrels at each location. So she creates these squirrels that can get puffed by Patriot because they have no abilities, and you can use them in so many different ways. You can use them in a Khazar deck where 1-cost cards get buffed. You can use them in a Patriot deck where cards with no abilities get buffed, and then the Squirrel Girl is just, you know, kind of just there. You can use her in a deck that wants to get out death, you can use her in a destroy deck, because if you play Killmonger, you can destroy all 3 1-drops with the Killmonger, the 2 squirrels and the squirrel girl, and that will give you your death for 6 cost. So she has a lot of utility. She's used in a lot of different ways, and the card is solid. I don't think she's fantastic because she does take up 3 slots on the board, but if the objective is to get rid of her, or if you're looking to buff those other cards, then I think she works pretty well, because she does a good job at keeping your board consistent. You know, you have 1 card in each location, and maybe the Squirrel Girl itself doesn't have a purpose, but maybe 2 out of the 3 cards do. So I do think that the card is very good early on, especially when you have stuff to work around it with. So Squirrel Girl, solid. Next up, we have Star-Lord. Oh, look, another Guardians of the Galaxy card, another hard read. He is a 2-cost, 2-power card that when an opponent plays a card here, he gets +3. So he can become a 2/5, kind of the same thing as Rocket Raccoon. It's pretty much the exact same ability and everything. So what else needs to be said? The Guardians of the Galaxy cards are high skill ceiling. For sure. You know, you're not using those unless you're a genius or a mathematician or something. Like, you're going to play exactly right here, right now. So, Star-Lord, C tier. Next up, we have Strong Guy. Strong Guy is a weird one. Strong Guy is a card that really kind of only works in, like, discard decks, but he's not really a discard card. Strong Guy is a 4/4 that his ability is that if there are no cards in your hand, he gets +6. So he becomes a 4/10, but you have to have an empty hand, which means for this card to work the way he's meant to work, on turn 6, you need to have no cards in your hand, right? Because you want to make him a 4/10 at the end of everything, because it's an ongoing effect. So if you have Strong Guy on turn 6 and you don't have a way to play every card that's in your hand, or you don't have a mean to get rid of all the other cards in your hand, like a MODOK or something, that's it. You know, your Strong Guy is just that it by itself. There's no way around it. So he's got a kind of a drawback to him. He's not fantastic in my opinion, but he's not bad either. He's probably going to be somewhere here at the bottom of the B, kind of close to like the good movement cards. So Strong Guy like has its place, but it's very hard to pull off in a lot of cases. So bottom of B for Strong Guy. All right, we're getting down here now. Next up is Swordmaster. Swordmaster is very good. Swordmaster is a 3-cost, 6-power card. I don't know why. Why is he so big? This card is very good. It discards a card from your hand as well, so it works well in a discard deck where you're trying to discard cards for, you know, buffing a different card, like a Morbius or something. So Swordmaster, very good. I'm going to put him in the A tier here, probably close to Lady Sif, something like this. Maybe like this. I'll put Spectrum a little higher. Yeah, something like that. Swordmaster somewhere here in the A tier for a 3-cost, a 6-power card. It's pretty outrageous. I'm actually going to put him a little bit above Lady Sif for that. Swordmaster is very good and works really well in a discard deck. Up next is Thing. Oh, look, another Patriot card. 4-cost, 6 power with no ability. So he's going to be more of the same from the Patriot line. Thing is probably the one you see the least, honestly. 4 power, 6, or 4 energy. I keep saying 4 power. 4 cost, 6 power. The only one I think he's better than is maybe Abomination, just for the value. Like 5.9 is just whack in my opinion. I don't know. So much more that you can get there. Thing, yeah, 4.6. Maybe he is worse than Abomination. I don't know. I don't really like that card. They got a buff Thing and Abomination, honestly. Up next, we have Uatu the Watcher. I think this card is pretty bad. It's a 1/2 that when you have it, you can see what the other locations are. So this card is good for like Foresight for like the first 2 or 3 turns, and then that's it. And then it's just a 1/2. It's like, I guess, but like, what if you don't have a way to like play around those locations? You know, if you have them in your deck and you don't have a way to deal with the locations that you see, then what? You just retreat sooner, I guess? Like, why wouldn't you just do that anyway? I'm going to put him at the top of F. Morph is going to be next to him, too. Like, these cards just don't make sense. Like, I don't know why you would play them instead of an actual real card, you know? Like, when you can actually, like, play something. I just think that it's a total waste. So, Uatu the Watcher, F tier. Next up, we have White Queen. I think White Queen is devastating. I'm going to put White Queen in S tier because I think this card is so good. She's a 4/6. She is what Thing should be, right? And she takes a copy of your highest cost card in your opponent's hand. So like on turn 4, you get to see what their turn is going to be. You get the foresight of knowing what their play is about to be on turn 6 or turn 5, because if you get a 5-drop, then you know they're about to play that 5-drop card, or there's a good chance they might play that 5-drop. Or if it's a 6-drop, then you get an idea of what's going on. So White Queen is like an absolutely crucial card that can really devastate a lot of players. And for 6 power, for 4 cost, that's really good. That's really good. So I think that's one of the best cards in the game right there. Thing, what are you doing, bro? You got no ability. You get buffed by Patriot. That's all you do. Whack. Up next, we have White Tiger. White Tiger's pretty good. She works well in a Wong deck with Odin, because you can get several tigers out that are 7 power. She is a 5 cost, 1 power card, so she herself is not very good in terms of power, but she creates tigers that are pretty good, I'd say. I would put her at like the top of B, because she is solid. 7 power isn't fantastic when it's just by itself, so you don't play her by herself. You got to use her in a combo. You got to use her with Wong, or you got to use her with Odin, so you can get more tigers out. That's kind of the idea of the card, but it does take up a lot of board space if you do it that way. And then the tigers get placed randomly. They don't go where you want them to go, so sometimes you get tigers in spots that don't end up winning you the game, and then you lose because the tiger went to the wrong spot. I'm gonna put her in the B tier because of that. She's a little inconsistent. It's a good card, but it's got some bad RNG. Next in line, we have Wolfsbane. Wolfsbane's a pretty good card. She is a 3/1 that gets +2 on reveal for every other card that is at this location when you play her. So I think she's going to be somewhere in the A tier for me. She's kind of like underrepresented, honestly, as far as I'm concerned. Wolfsbane's pretty good. I think she's kind of underutilized too, where if you like have a location where you have like say Wong and 2 other cards, if you play a Wolfsbane on turn 6, she's gonna get +16, so she becomes a 3/17 on a turn 6. That is nasty. That card becomes huge. So I think Wolfsbane is very good, very overlooked as a card, and I'd like to see more Wolfsbane in the future too. I think this card has some really good capabilities, and I think that she can be nasty in the right deck. So Wolfsbane definitely up there in pool 1. Up next, we have Wolverine, who is a 2/2 that whenever he gets destroyed, he gets moved to a random location or discarded. If he gets discarded, this happens too, and he gets +2 power for every time this happens. So every time that you discard or destroy Wolverine, he gets +2 power. So in a destroy deck, Wolverine becomes a crazy card. I think Wolverine becomes very good. I'm going to put Wolverine probably, I'm thinking about S or the top of A. If it's top of A, I got to move the tier list over again. I'm thinking top of A is probably where he goes. I'm going to say somewhere like right here, because he's very good now. He used to be pretty mid, but I think he's a lot better now. I think that utility is insane. And for a 2/2 to just keep growing like that, when you're literally just discarding the card once and destroying him a whole bunch of times, like, he just follows suit with all the other cards that you play, and he just gets bigger over time just for you playing the game. So he's just a nasty card. I could see the argument for S tier for Wolverine, though. He gets crazy. All right, this tier list is getting pretty big now. Our last card in line, we're going to have to scroll for this a little bit, is Yondu. Yondu is definitely an A tier card. We're going to put him in the A tier here. Yondu is really good, in my opinion, because he just discards a card from your opponent's hand. Or not your opponent's hand. He discards a card from your opponent's deck, just for being a 1/2. You know, he's like the Iceman of pool 1. I'm gonna put him. Where do I put Yondu? Yondu's always gonna be around. I could see them changing him to a 1/1, honestly, because discarding a card is just huge, man. The utility there is crazy. He can get rid of an America Chavez, you know, so that they don't have that turn 6 guarantee. They might not have another plan besides the America Chavez. So this card has a lot going for him, because he can really make some big, crucial plays. So Yondu is definitely going to be A tier for me. And there you have it. It took well over an hour, but here is my pool 1 tier list here for Marvel Snap. S tier has got some very particular cards that I think are always going to be fantastic. You have the A tier, some very, very good cards in there. B tier, some of the cards that are still good but not quite as reliable. C tier are the cards that I think need to be adjusted in some way, or maybe they're just meant to be bad, because not every card can be good. And then the F tier is just like what are you doing? Pool 1's got a lot of great cards in it. Don't feel like you have to rush to get to Pool 3 or Pool 4 to really make some nasty decks, because Pool 1 has a lot to offer. Thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. Don't forget to snap that subscribe button, and I will see you next time. Take it easy.